behind Q. He's working for the president. He's working for our country.
Alien life, like pedophiles, and it just seeks to tie all of that together.
Welcome to the 10th episode of QAnon Anonymous. I'm your host, Jake.
And I'm your co-host, Julian. And this week we're sitting with Jordan Buell, journalist, activist, writer, and host of the Rust Belt to Beltway podcast, a political podcast that focuses on the grassroots instead of all the coastal punditry.
Yes, another fantastic podcast where the hosts know more probably than Julian and myself.
It's about belts. It's just reviews of different belts.
Different fashion accessories, yeah.
Yeah, belt buckles. It's a Texas-based podcast. Welcome. So excited to have you as a guest.
Yeah, man. Thanks for coming on.
Of course, I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
I actually have prepared a little bit of a fun time for us today. I want to kick the podcast off with a bit of a cruise into a political party that I've discovered recently called the Compassion Party. Now,
boy.
The Compassion Party is obviously an independent party. Their names are Reverend Alan Gordon, who is running for Attorney General, and Ann Armstrong, who is running for governor of Rhode Island.
And I'm looking at a picture of him, and he looks like, can you hold that up to the camera, Julian, so Jordan can see? I mean, he literally looks like a young, hip version of Lurch from the Addams Family.
He looks so stoned.
It's like if Andy Dick had fetal alcohol syndrome and was also malnourished.
Yes, it is.
Damn, that's oddly specific and right on.
So these people are amazing because they're a mix of things. They got on my radar because they are Q believers running for government, which is, I think, a sign of our future.
Yeah. A true sign of leadership.
I mean, we're so close, right? Why not take that little extra step? So if you're in Rhode Island, get ready to vote for the Compassion Party. Now, the Compassion Party has a lot of internal contradictions. For example, they are anti-abortion, but pro-legalization of marijuana. At first, I was like, oh, they like marijuana. Like, they seem like aging stoners, maybe live in Venice Beach. But then what they did was NBC 10 on their local channel basically sent out a questionnaire. It's just a standard-ass questionnaire. You get to answer whatever you want, and they've very clearly typed in the answers themselves, and it was published with no corrections, so there's a lot of misspellings and stuff, but the answers are magnificent. I'll start with Mr. Reverend Alan Gordon, and we will end with Ann Armstrong, who's also just fantastic. So this is some kind of boilerplate questions, like what's the biggest issue facing the state? They both are running on something quite noble, which is the end of the opioid crisis. Of course, their solution to the opioid crisis, as well as all economic crises, is what they call regenerative financing, which both of them are spelling different, but they clearly are getting ready to trademark it. So under what this is question 5. Under what circumstances would you support the legalization of marijuana for recreational use in Rhode Island? Now, he just starts his response with all caps in brackets. Just all caps in brackets. Please note that 2 states no longer use the word for cannabis, owing to past racism associated with the word's introduction into mainstream U.S. English. Because it is actually a backwards pronunciation of an ancient Hebrew blessing still used by many elderly Jews, the M word for cannabis is actually a curse to me as well.
Oh my God.
As well, so as a matter of politeness, I'm going to ask your station to use the neutral term cannabis like the state of Hawaii. Now, that's the end of his brackets. That's not even his answer. So, okay, he goes on. During the opiate crisis, when cannabis could have been helping addicts wean off, my opponent, as U.S. attorney, let a $500 million pill deal go without a single criminal indictment, while he also imprisoned one cannabis church's leader.
Wait, cannabis church?
Yeah, it's your kind of church.
Yeah, tell me more.
Then fought another for 2 years in court with twisted priorities. Cannabis must never be the subject of recreational sin taxes because it is known to enhance neurological placebism via its action on nerve receptors, and so will cause users to sin, and then the state is promoting sin.
I mean, it sounds like straight out of the Scientology pamphlet.
That tracks. Yeah, that's good.
Nobody should ever go to jail simply for this plant. Totally agree. And as it turns out, the original U.S. ban's author, Harry Anslinger, a notorious racist, left a written confession in his archives, which I found and published, indicating that he was a Nazi German agent.
Man, I can't even follow this dude's logic behind this.
This dude's response to boilerplate, what are your policies?
It's almost as if he's working extra hard to let everybody know that he himself is not racist, but at the same time, also kind of comes off as a little anti-Semitic too.
This is my favorite. What has drawn you to public service? The need to stop the child trafficking cover-up crisis in Rhode Island. Nothing
Hell
could be
yeah.
more important. And then he has no period. It just ends.
I wish after it he had written, "Where we go one, we go all."
His responses are basically weird Twitter. Like, he just doesn't even
Yeah.
end them with a period.
It's weird. It's weird. Twitter. You
three
have to be in the
commas.
mind of a public Q supporter, like myself. Obviously, I love Q.
Yeah, that's why we're here.
Yeah, that's why we're here.
We're all here because we are believers in Q, and I believe Rhode Island is about to be the center of a lot of fantastic
What if-
government activity.
What if Rhode Island became like the center of like the Q, like the exposing like the human trafficking like orgs and shit, and like these two senators who will spend an hour, making fun of like actually like led the charge and like saved the children.
What is the best advice you have ever gotten? And his answer is just the 10 Commandments.
Those are given to him. Interesting.
It's just so straightforward. Top item on your bucket list. My life has been so rewarding and bountiful so far, I would donate the pick to someone in true need. So
nice.
I think he's confusing bucket list with make-a-wish. Like, he thinks he's like, no, I would totally not take the wish. And
He was like, I would give up my end of life dreams if somebody. I mean, it's noble.
And then right at the end, these are the bonus questions. They don't even have to answer them. He chose to answer these. What question do you wish someone would ask you, and what would your answer be? I wish someone would ask me what legal options there are to move Planned Parenthood to a new location so it won't be nestled between Providence's two largest churches.
A new location on the fucking moon.
Well, it's not even like getting it out of like Rhode Island. It's just like
Yeah.
wherever that is on that street. That's a very hyper local issue.
No, it's very much like his down this. It's like between the two largest churches and two largest high schools, or in parentheses, as the Bible calls it, the abomination that causes desolation, standing where it does not belong.
Weird.
Yeah, women getting health care. That's a very serious issue.
He's like, there are a lot of stray cats. I don't know why I'm giving him this voice, but he's like, there's lots of stray cats in that alley, and if you moved it into the ocean, I think it would really clean up that block.
The law of the U.S. and Rhode Island firmly permit the black genocide of abortion, but even for abortionists, that location is over the top, out of bounds, and has to go.
Whoa.
Just
What?
just puts in just the last question. By the way, the question is just, what question do you wish someone would ask you? Like, he fucking.
He's like, I wish somebody would ask me how we could abolish this biblical stain that's causing the black genocide. Like, damn, dude, like bonus. It's an EC question, extra credit. If that shit was on your like high school exam or whatever, that's where you go like, I like cats, and that's it. And,
Well, speaking of I like cats, Anne Armstrong opens up with a much more direct approach. The first question: what differentiates you from your opponents? I'm very tall, I have good hair. My IQ is probably higher than the sum of any two of my opponents, and I'm not submissive to anyone.
now that's a great answer.
That's Trumpian.
Yeah, that's very
Yeah.
Trumpian.
She doesn't take shit.
No, hair's good, smart, best words.
Tall, double IQ.
Yeah.
Now the funny thing is, let's say her opponent's IQ was 80, which is relatively low-ish, is it not? Isn't
I think
70 on the lower end
I
of the
think
spectrum?
if they have an IQ of 80, they might be mentally challenged, no?
Okay, but if you double those two,
160?
it leaves you 160, which is like untracked, like genius level, like Albert Einstein level of IQ, is it not?
Yeah, no, she's saying I'm a tall genius.
I believe her. Jordan?
I have no reason to doubt her.
Anne Armstrong, also, if you go to her Facebook page, she finished a debate and then photoshopped herself in a USA bikini,
Tight.
standing above her opponents, which she photoshopped to look stupid or whatever. Really amazingly bad Photoshop. And it just says, I won the debate.
Oh, hell yeah. That's cool. That's really cool.
Yeah, there's nothing like winning a debate and then photoshopping yourself in a bikini over your opponent.
I won it.
That's just like excessive celebration, man. I think that goes a little too far.
I think that they're just people who love marijuana. I think for years they were the kind of like granola-ish resistor kind of people. And the problem with some of the pothead that generation is that they're like kind of into aliens, and so they're like one step away from getting like Q red pilled. So just one bad choice online, and then they wake up and they're like this instead of like just someone who's fighting for weed legalization. I think they must be born again too. Like their Christianity does not seem like it's been a whole life kind of thing,
Right.
Yeah, I mean, when you say like the best advice that you've ever been given is the 10 Commandments, that sounds like a piece of advice that you got late in life, you know?
She by the end of her second question, which is pretty boilerplate, she mentions children being debauched and their future corrupted. So she's heading towards the direction I think we all know she's going to be at. Her answer to the gun laws, both of their answers to the gun laws, is that people should have guns and it's fine. Also, he had a really long answer where he was like, yes, I've been arrested many times and cops have beat the shit out of me, but I've changed my mind about cops. Now I love cops. Like, it's this really long paragraph where he goes from, and then he gives people advice like, when you're being arrested, like, don't try to resist. Just, you know.
Yeah, I think their main problem with their policy is that you can't be Q and then another thing. You're either all in on Q or you're with sort of everybody else.
So her comment on the ownership of weapons is that we're wasting our time on these red herrings, and we should instead put energy into educating parents that if they allow their kids to play first-person shooter video games, it's very likely that one or two of these kids will be susceptible to the reward system on the game and someday act it out.
Yeah, that's why I've been calling in like tactical nukes on all of my friends. I played Call of Duty growing up, and I go on rampages frequently. She's right. That's true.
Yeah. When I jumped on my wife last week and she didn't become a coin, it was really uncomfortable. So under what circumstances would you support the legalization of marijuana for recreational use in Rhode Island? Now, guess what her response is. I'm going to ask you to refrain from the use of that racist word, which those of my race and faith find offensive in extremis. Oh, no. I don't know what her race is.
Wait, those of my race and faith?
I don't know what her race is. But then she goes on to talk about holy chrism oils, the sacrament of anointing of the sick,
the blood of the child.
Now, this one's fucking amazing. Is the minimum wage in Rhode Island too high, too low, or just right? If not just right, what should it be? Fucking straightforward, right? Her answer. Pope Leo XIII wrote an encyclical called Rerum Novarum, in which he described two concept of a just wage. The notion that humans should be forced to sell all their productive hours for less money than they can live on is disgraceful. Fuck yeah. And then, fortunately, my regenerative funding model will restore such abundance to all that the concept of minimum wage will become obsolete. What national issue or controversy do you believe resonates most deeply in Rhode Island? The child sex trafficking rings that President Trump has been breaking up has a nexus of activity in Rhode Island. Missing children, abuse, and blah, 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 blah. I mean, it's almost sad, to be honest.
Until all those child trafficking rings get exposed, and then... and then she's vindicated.
What about this? 10. What is an example of a policy or issue you've changed your view on in the last 20 years? I used to think cannabis was dangerous and yell at my kids when I caught them with it. Then I saw it cure cancer.
Yeah.
And that's it.
I love seeing marijuana cure cancer. Who is your political hero and why? And this is a classic Q hero, John F. Kennedy. Right?
Hell yeah.
Killed by the deep state before his time.
The ultimate martyr.
Yeah, he is. He is. It works that he's a Democrat only because they're convinced the deep state murdered him.
Right.
What is the best advice you have ever gotten? Pushing works better if you put your chin on your chest and around your shoulders. This when I was delivering my fourth child.
Whoa.
So just... like,
what a twist.
That's fucking awesome. I have to say, that's ballsy, dude. Yeah. If she had a sense of humor, like in the rest of her shit, I would be like, this is masterful.
Yeah, it's almost when I'm listening to you read this shit, it's almost like there's a half of a percentage of like that I'm like, oh man, they're almost a full percent of good.
So we're almost done with her. She has, of course, a son, and she loves her son very much. The last music concert you saw. My son Thomas performing Wieniawski Violin Concerto 222.
Oh, that's disappointing. I was hoping for something really weird.
But then she goes on, what sports teams do you cheer the loudest for? And then she talks about pro UT/EWG football. Because my son Thomas, the violin prodigy, is starting offensive and defensive line. So please pray that his hands and head stay safe and protected.
What the fuck? That's the dumbest parental move ever. Like, my parents would have been like, one or the other, dude. You can get the shit beat out of you in football, or you can be a violin mastermind. Like, you choose.
This man whose hands are very fragile, he's very, very good at the violin. We're sending him into a career in football.
Wait, what positions did he play?
It just says offensive and defensive line. Does that make sense? I don't know anything
so
about
he's
this.
like literally in the trenches. Like what? Like that's where you're gonna like fingers are gonna get caught in the jerseys. You're gonna break your fingers. You're gonna break your wrist, sprain your wrist.
Yeah.
That's a good idea. Awesome. That's cool.
I
That'll
mean,
work out
you know
well.
what though? It's kind of in line with their entire life philosophy is believing in two things that are completely incompatible with one another.
they're just
So wait, so you're saying an offensive and defensive line is probably a large adult son, right?
yeah. You gotta be big. You gotta be big for that.
Yeah.
Got to be a thick boy. And then finally, she answers. This is a fantastic final question. What question do you wish someone would ask you, and what would your answer be? How do you plan to solve the fossil fuel crisis? The Rhode Island State House dome is made of piezoelectric Georgia marble, and the architect who designed it, Stanford White, was Nikola Tesla's close friend. The two of them were working on a sustainable energy dome called Wardenclyffe Tower at the same time our State House was being built. I have evidence that the RI State House dome is a free energy dome and that it can be possible to figure out how to turn it on.
Oh my god.
I'm trained as an electrical engineer, and I used to design torpedoes for Raytheon. I know a transducer when I see one.
Oh,
Oh my
So-
god.
So
That's
just-
got to be their campaign slogan.
Yeah.
I know a transducer when I see one. Are you kidding, man? I'd run out to the polls. I wouldn't care about anything else. I'd be like, transducer? That's a word that I've never heard before, and I love it.
What does it mean? What's transducer, Jordan? Help
Oh,
us.
I don't know. I'm just I'm marveling at these two candidates. This is the kind of like bold leadership that the Dems really need. I really hope that like we groom them into being our 2020 ticket.
Yeah.
Honestly, when I read both of these, I was like, Ocasio-Cortez doesn't know what she's talking about. Whereas these people have answers for the fossil fuel crisis. I'd never heard her say that the minimum wage is going to go obsolete under her great policies. So, yeah, your turn, Alexandria.
Yeah, lead our people to a magic dome of endless energy.
Ocasio never made torpedoes for Raytheon, and you kind of have to question like what kind of praxis is that? And to me, that's very problematic that she never did that.
Until you've hand built a torpedo for a giant arms dealer, I don't think you've really lived, and you shouldn't access power.
Absolutely not. Yeah, you must have at least one weapon of destruction under your belt.
So, but I marvel at the history of these people, the hyper-religiosity, the pro-marijuana stuff, and then the combination of like anti-abortion, but then also they believe in like energy shit and the pedophile rings that Trump is shutting down.
Well, I mean, it's no like surprise why they like Q so much, because when you go into depth on all of the different threads of the Q conspiracy, oftentimes it's shit that doesn't seem like it should link together, and yet they found a way to make it. It feels very, it just feels very disconnected from reality.
So, Jordan, one of the reasons why you're on the podcast is because you raised over $40,000 for a man named Anthony Torres. He was recorded shaving on a commuter train, and he later told the Associated Press, "My life is all screwed up. That's the reason I was shaving on the train." So, where did you find out about this video first?
I saw the original tweet, like I think the day that it was posted, and the guy captioned it something like, "Yay, like New Jersey Transit, baby," kind of like that Guido, like I'm walking here type of voice.
Right.
And I saw it, and at first I thought like, oh, this is funny, and then it was just like it felt really, really off. Like nobody, like I don't like to shave, like I don't want to shave in public, I barely like to shave at home. So it's like something is not, like he's either running late, like he's struggling or something, like his day is not going well. So I didn't do anything with it. And then a couple of days later, I saw the article that you just referenced, right? And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
I wonder what kind of numbers that tweet did. And I went back and saw that guy had replied to his own tweet with like, for licensing inquiries, like contact this thing.
Are you
So he was
fucking
like,
kidding
Oh
me?
my
yeah,
God.
he was like literally trying to.
Selling this footage?
Yeah, he was trying to profit off of like his video making fun of a homeless guy, and it just like that pissed me off.
Yep.
Damn, dude. Fuck.
I mean, if you look at that video and you don't think, oh, we live in a country where most people are, living check to check, if they even have a home.
And you've got some fucking transducer putting his phone on it, putting his phone on this as if it's an inconvenience to him.
And so how did they identify the man as Anthony Torres, and how did you follow from there?
So the AP story, they identified him. So I had his name in a DM group. I was just like, do you think we could like raise money for this guy. Because I've done fundraising on Twitter before, and it's kind of hit and miss. Sometimes people are more willing to give depending on the cause. You never know. And I like was quickly reminded that other GoFundMes recently had been scams and presenting themselves as to benefit a homeless person. I tracked down that reporter and was like, do you have his contact information? Like, I want to set this up for him. And I did it anyway. I set the GoFundMe up anyway without like knowing if he would receive it or if I can get in contact with him, with like the alternate plan being at least it can go, we could use this as an opportunity to inspire people to give and then just give it to a facility or shelter in his area that helps people.
Totally.
So at least we could help somebody.
This
as a result of
situation.
this.
Yeah, even by proxy, you know, you find his area. Yeah, totally.
So we did. I started the GoFundMe and also reached out to the reporter. And at the same time, basically, someone from his family had seen the GoFundMe, and she gave me the phone number, and the phone numbers matched. So I knew it was like definitely that person reaching out, and gave him a call, got a hold of his brother, and was basically like, but at that point, within a day, I had like 10,000. I was like, I've got this money for you.
Holy shit, dude, that's crazy.
It was unexpected.
Were you surprised by how quickly it took off? I mean, in the end, now there's over 1,600 people donated.
Yeah. I set the goal originally, I think, for 5,000.
Yeah.
And then maybe moved it to like 10 pretty quickly. And then just kept like bumping it up like here and there just to continue to inspire people to give as it grew and as it got more and more publicity. So I figured to ride it out as much as we can because that just like gets him stable, right? It's one thing just to get him. I just framed it originally as get him back on his feet, but like even 10,000, like it looks like a good amount. We would all accept it, but like that's not a lot. Like in the long term, that's not going to solve his problem. So like now he can actually buy a trailer, right? So we actually got him to a point of stability, which was the goal.
Nice.
Do you think, and this is a serious question, do you think that this campaign, people responded to it so well because the guy who took the original video was such a piece of shit? like, do you think that somebody, because dude, I've seen the same thing. I've seen a lot of campaigns go up. People are really trying to, you know, raise awareness and help for people in need, homeless people. And it's like you said, like they're hit or miss. You know, it's certain campaigns tend to go viral more than other ones. And I'm just curious if people like looked into their hearts and they were like, not only is this guy having a shitty day, like when you have to do any of your bathroom duties in a public place, no matter what, you're having a shitty day.
Yep.
And they look at this fucking, you know, the guy doing, hey, fucking, wow, shave the face over here. Like, and they were like, man, to top it all off, like you've got this guy being like, hey, licensing questions and restrictions, email Tony Big Time at, you know, AOL.com.
That does kind of feel like the level we've reached, though, this grotesque, constant spectacle where, you know, everything is just exploitation and like mirrored captures of people pointing things at things. I mean, it's just, I always think like, how do we get here? But then I'm also thinking if this guy had never videotaped Anthony, you would have never found out, and he wouldn't, you know, have this kind of chance to get stable, you know. So maybe he's a hero, and you're a bad guy. I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out.
That's it. Yep. Yeah. That's it. Yeah. I'm the villain here. I'm sorry. I'm gonna be taking a break.
You capitalized on Tony Goodboy's video. You know, he was gonna get a ton of licensing deals, and you kind of just yanked the carpet out from under him.
You gotta, you know. Okay, let me explain how skits work. You gotta pick a different name for your second character. Okay, you can't just get Tony if the first guy's name is Anthony. We're not in a good place now.
Yeah.
Well, actually, every Italian guy in New York is named, so he's just being true to form.
Have you met with Anthony in person?
No, we talk on the phone a lot. Right now, I mean, so he has been calling me a lot lately, and I have not been answering his calls because he's trying to give me part of the GoFundMe. And I think this reflects, and I say this not because like, oh, look, I'm turning down this money, but look, I think it reflects the attitude and the mindset of people who are less fortunate that gets like ignored and never acknowledged in discussions about economic inequality.
Yeah.
This guy had nothing, no home, no job, no income. He's on disability. He gets this lump sum of money, and his first thing he wants to do is help the person who helped him back. It's just like, it's just these people, they're not like these monsters, these craven beasts that society makes them out to be when it comes to economic policy. And I just like, I only say that because I want people to understand that that's where his heart is, and that's where just about everyone else in his situation. That's where their heart is too.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It is really touching to hear that. And you mentioned that there were some obstacles in getting Anthony the money. What happened there?
Yeah. So this again, it shows like systemic barriers to like escaping poverty, right? So he had no ID. So and then he had to find his paperwork to show who he was, and he had to show proof of residency and all this kind of stuff just to get a bank or to get his ID. And then after he got his ID, he then had to open a new bank account and also address overdraft fees from.
Wow.
So it's just like,
Oh, God
if
damn.
he was not about to receive, I just like even one of these things we think is like a huge inconvenience. Imagine multiple sequential issues for people like him when you have nothing to your name.
Yeah.
And just like this society is so broken that we just like punish and oppress poor people, and just like pisses me off.
Yeah, no, of course.
And even when somebody gets a second chance, and this happens, I think it happens on all levels. It's happened to me when I've had a shittier job and then I've gone to a better or gotten a bonus or a raise, and the tax bracket is now different. So the money that I was going to save, actually doesn't, come out to anything. But the system is literally designed to keep people from getting to the next level.
You could argue about unemployment being lower, or more people being covered or whatever, but the reality is it doesn't matter. You can have 3 jobs and not being able to pay rent. You can have you can basically even have health insurance and be bankrupted by a single medical bill. Things that on the face were the measure of whether society was going well in this area no longer work. That's why you can have Trump up there screaming about, well, more people are employed now, or like black people have a lower unemployment rate than ever before. He can say that because employment no longer means anything. It's not a source of stable living, and most jobs pay like shit. But I mean, today I got the news that Bernie, fought for the Amazon thing, and now it's $15. He's going to be paying $15 to his, to his employees. That big Jeff Bezos man. So it's like I'm pissed off because Bernie did another misogynist, racist thing, and
Yet again.
Typical Bernie.
What's your relationship like with Anthony? I mean, even as my life is now, if somebody came and offered me that amount of money and was like, hey, man, I raised this for you, like, I wouldn't know how to act. And I would feel like in debt to that person, or is there a catch? I mean, are they using me for something? Like, where do you go from here in terms of your guys' relationship?
I don't know. That's a good question. So, right, like I said earlier, I have not been answering the phone calls because he just like, the guy is just like really nice. He's really appreciative.
Yeah.
Like he means really well, and I think it's just like, again, it shows like the compassion inherent in most people. But I don't know how to handle the situation, so I've just been ignoring it. I'd like to hear about like what's next, right?
Yeah.
Because he's had a lot of people reach out with offers to help in other areas too.
Right.
And I wanted to wait on those because he was like overwhelmed, right? So it was like,
of course,
the press blitz in the first week or two. I mean, it was getting to the point where like Steve Harvey, like their show reached out, Ellen reached out, like all these people wanted to talk to him.
Wow, that's nuts.
And he was like, to go from like being homeless and not being able to have a reliable source of income to pay for your medications, that instability, then immediately you add national media scrutiny. It was just like he was not handling it very well. He was very stressed.
of course.
Very paranoid. Very, very paranoid. Thought like he kept asking if GoFundMe was taking the money, if like what was going to happen. And then as anyone who encounters a new lump sum of money, people from his life in the past were coming out of like the woodwork to ask him for money.
Sure.
Of course, yeah.
It's just like people's, but I think, let me rephrase. I was going to jump in and say agree, but I think it reflects like just the overall economic issues in America.
Yeah.
That like, so many people are struggling, that like everybody needs help, and just like it doesn't matter how they get it, they just really, really need help because it's just so unjust. And like Jake, I think you were saying earlier, like you're pointing out like the overdraft fees and how fucked up it was. It's just like that's an industry that received billions of dollars in bailouts and gave themselves bonuses, but still won't forgive this guy for like a $30 overdraft fee.
$60, $80, whatever. Money that is it's a fart in the wind to these people, and it's like they're still like, well, no, because if we bend the rules for this man, then we're gonna have to. I mean, that's the problem. The problem is is that we, especially that financial world, lives by a rule set of no exceptions, and I think that I think even just adding that, being able to look at sort of the human element of it and be like, have somebody in that fucking boardroom being like, well, look, guys, he's been fucking homeless for God knows how long. Can we waive the $80 overdraft fees or whatever? But the problem is nobody's getting hired like that, because the moment somebody, at least in my experience, that somebody expresses humanity in a situation like that, you're thought of as weak, or that you're gonna cost the company money as opposed to make it, and it's just the wrong way to. It's just the wrong angle to look at this kind of shit.
Speaking of banks, and yes, it is our official stance that banks can get fucked. Speaking of total assholes, what do you think about people using GoFundMe to raise money for the likes of Kavanaugh and James Comey? Hundreds of thousands of dollars for people who make huge salaries and have massive savings and live in multiple homes.
I don't get it. I don't get it. And it's not even obviously we're all on the same page. We think it's fucked up. It's stupid. Why are poor people giving rich people money because they're mildly inconvenienced, when they're going to turn around? Every single person that they do this for is going to have a book deal. They're going to have TV appearances. Like, they are set. They're fine.
Yep.
They're going to be on board.
They always were fine, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. They're going to have some cushy lobbying gig. And it just boggles my mind. And this is not our frustration and our irritation with those situations. That's not even shared with the center, left, and moderates. Maybe that's not surprising. But I have this gag with my buddy Ken Klippenstein. Every time we suspect someone in the Trump administration is going to get fired, we'll do this rotating, goofy looking text that says, if so-and-so gets fired, do not create a GoFundMe for them. So I recently did it for Rod Rosenstein, when everyone there was big media stakeout, right? And a prolific centrist tweeter snarkily replied "Oh, this is your biggest concern right now."
Wow.
I quickly pointed out that I was also the organizer of the March for Truth, the creator of a global march about this whole issue, and also have a several hundred city rapid response plan that I've been working on in that capacity and my move on capacity. So it's oh no, I actually have a nationwide rapid response protest, but also please don't give this guy money.
Does it hurt your feelings that you got muted by that guy?
He's missing out on some real good tweets, so it's his loss.
He sure is. Yeah, he's missing out on some good old fashioned human compassion.
I fucking, when I think about that amount of money that is raised in those things, it really strikes me that because money is exchanged for pleasure, whether it's comfort, or at first it's exchanged for needs, then it's exchanged for pleasure. But the amount of pleasure that we take from just tribalist fuck you actions like that, just pure actions based in spite, where it's let's raise this much money to own the libs, fuck you. It's oh yeah, if we raise $500,000 for some fucking FBI twat, that's going to show Trump. Do you think he gives a shit? It doesn't change anything. Stop wasting your money. Stop spending money in spite. Just in general, that's a good rule. So you spent a lot of time investigating and covering the far right and the alt-right. So what particularly draws you to, a certain amount of playful, but also, intense conflict with these really out there personalities?
Well, I can't say I do it as much as others, like Jared Holt. Someone I actually just get a lot of information from him and kind of try to amplify it.
Yeah,
it's so funny to me what people latch on to, and I think it can kind of cut both ways. It's humorous, but it's also kind of sad that they are just so, and however they ended up there, whether it's they're kind of just there's something going on, or they're just that's what they actually believe. However they ended at that conclusion is just really intriguing to me. The funny thing, though, I think, well, maybe it's not funny, but the one thing I always try to keep in the front of my mind is this is not reflective of most people.
No, it isn't. Yeah,
especially most people on the right. I would say I think I have a certain level of animus to a lot of Republicans, just because the policies are objectively destructive and harmful to oppressed people and marginalized groups. But for instance, my family is on the right, and they asked, I talked to my mom earlier today, and she asked what I was doing tonight, and I explained I was going to come on and talk about this kind of stuff. She had no idea what QAnon was. And I had to break the whole thing down to her, and she thought it was so bizarre. And just like, so that's like a little bit of like a relief to me as well.
Yeah.
So it's like a little bit, I guess it's like, I find it like entertaining the way like people find wrestling entertaining.
Yes, that's what,
You know, it's just like absurd, but just like stupid. I wish Alex Jones was not as harmful as he was, because I think he could have had the same thing going for him if he didn't like actually inspire people to like go after Sandy Hook parents, you know?
Yeah.
If he just had like just some goofy off the wall like conspiracy theories, that would have been like a really funny.
Yeah, they haven't really found that happy medium between entertainment and inspiring people to go out and do crazy shit. You know, there's
Right.
it's like we don't have a fun harmless Alex Jones. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people would argue that he's totally harmless, but like it's almost in the nature of that right wing, that like super, you know, alt-right, all that shit. It's almost the nature of it is to motivate action. There's nothing that's just kind of there for funsies, you know?
Yeah, it's a recurring thing. Like the people who come on our show have been doxxed in some way by some psychopath, you know. So what is the weirdest thing that you've covered in your days as a journalist and writer?
In college, this isn't like internet related. This is like in real life weird.
Yeah.
There was a guy, I had a story, a series of stories, because it was just like an ongoing thing. Got to the point where like police were putting up flyers around our campus. A guy just could not stop masturbating in public, like on campus. He just like would just run up to, and he was a student. The guy just like loved to jack off.
Was his name Julian?
Piece of shit.
So I did this story. It was like, okay, we have a chronic masturbator on campus. And
Wait, you had to cover it for your like the paper, like the school paper?
Yeah,
That's
I was like
amazing.
I was the editor, or one of the editors. I was like news editor at the time, and I was like, no, this is a serious story. I got this, guys.
Yeah.
And did it, and then like it kept continuing, and then I got it like we pulled the police reports every day and saw that they had arrested the guy. So I did this whole narrative about like the police chase and all that. So I think that is like, okay, it's goofy, it's funny, but the weird element came from the next semester. I go in, first day of class, I go into this like seminar, and they're doing roll call, and he is in my class. And he sees me, I see him. I think when we get roll call, he finally realized what I actually looked like.
Right.
But like I already knew from his mugshot, so I was kind of like waiting, and he never showed up after that day.
You know, and
that was the
they
weirdest
say they
thing.
don't give second chances to young men, but I want to tell you that when you let some guy who's been jacking off all around college,
Balls on this guy to come back to school.
the balls and the dick.
Shit, I mean, fuck, dude. If I peed my pants in college in a college class, I'd never come back. I mean, it was like,
Oh, that would have been bad.
That's pretty amazing. Yeah. Actually, I have a story in college of a masturbator. One night we were going to just, I think, pick up some alcohol or something. It was nearly midnight, and we were walking down towards the 7-Eleven or something like that.
perfect place to get alcohol.
And there was just a guy wearing nothing but army boots and a Santa Claus hat, just furiously masturbating against a pole.
Nice. Was he trying to get his like dick stuck to the pole like
I don't know, man.
like a Christmas story?
Christmas story.
He had his back like leaning against the thing, and he was just locked eyes with us.
Oh,
so
tight.
we-
So you guys
we
were probably
fucking bailed.
You're
Like,
probably part
intimate.
of his nut. He probably
Yeah,
later on
something.
you probably ruined it. It's like when I'm jacking off and I'm looking at the porn on the phone, and then my mom calls and the picture of her face goes on like right as I'm about to nut, and I'm like, oh no, ruined. Same for this dude. He probably was like, oh mom, I'm gonna come on his pole.
No, it
I'm gonna
wasn't.
come on
He
his
wa-
telephone pole, and he was like, college kids.
He was like a flag jacking off away from the pole, you know?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. He was like a flag at if someone dies and it's at the bottom of the mat.
Oh yeah. Okay. Cool.
So what do you think about the rise in popularity of the QAnon movement?
That's a good segue. I think that,
The intellectual equivalent of what we just described.
Yes.
yeah. I guess at the end of the day, it like reflects like this like polarization, right? And I think that we have, and I guess to circle back to our social media conversation, it can be so destructive, it could be corrosive on society. And I think one thing, social media, and especially like cable news and like Fox News and all like that whole right-wing media apparatus, what they've done is dehumanize their opponent to the point where we just like levy baseless accusations against people and like entire groups of people with zero evidence, and it just people run with it, and it is absolutely insane, and it makes me very fearful for the next 5 to 10 years. Let alone, I don't even know if we'll be if we're gonna burn up or get blown up in the next like 20 years. So I'm a little bit more pessimistic on that one, but it just like I'm very fearful for the future because it is just this is. I guess it was only a matter of time before something like this happened, where people were cheering on this concept of the president locking up his political opponents.
Right.
Like, that's horrifying.
Yeah.
Horrifying.
No, it's true that's new. I mean, there was no, even during the worst of the Bush campaigning, there was no call to lock up Kerry. You know what I mean?
Now, do you think if Hillary Clinton had won, and this is a question for you too, Julia.
We'd all be having brunch.
Do you think that they would have gone after Donald Trump criminally? Because they levied all of this stuff about the collusion with Russia and all this shit even before he had even won the presidency. Do you think
that
if Hillary Clinton had won, we would be in a reverse bizarro world where the Dems and the liberals are chanting, lock him up, lock him up? Because I feel we're there all,
But they did, but it doesn't happen. Like, no matter how vicious the left can be, and it can be stupid and it can be very vicious, and I'm not talking, of course, of the left is, every time I have to make this qualification, but anyways, I'm talking about, kind of your standard boilerplate, face of the Democratic Party, basically what I consider right of center. But they can be horrifying, but very rarely do they have true bloodlust. I think it's always, like, even in their wildest fantasies, they tend not to fantasize about Donald Trump being murdered or hung, Like, they will call him a traitor, but they don't want him murdered. Whereas the right is really into power for its own, for its own purpose. So however you get there, it doesn't matter. And at this point, I think there's a certain amount of the country that feels like I've been so wronged. There's nothing except literally the murder of the people responsible for this that would set this right. And that sense of profound kind of injustice and even like aggrievement or having had a grave injury done to you is what underpins this movement. The problem is that it's possible to feel like a people have aggrieved you when they haven't. Yes. And that is the essence of anti-Semitism. It's the essence of racism. It's this idea that you feel like you've been fucked over or you're being unjustly screwed over by a certain group of people. And it's only dangerous because it's not rooted in fact. Because, if you are, early Warsaw ghetto Jewish person and you're seeing your people rounded up and stuff, there is a group of people that is out to fuck you. But, when you think that they're running a cabal of pedophiles out of Rhode Island and you need to immediately intervene to stop it because all of these Democrats are like feeding on their blood and we should hang these people because they're criminals and pedophiles, I'm going to say that that's not firmly rooted in reality. Do you know what I mean?
I would agree with you. As much as I love the QAnon shit, you guys know, Jordan, I love it. I do believe some aspects of it, like the
Spygate. Spygate has
I believe
some
like
interesting...
the Spygate aspect, which is what got me into it. But then over the course of this podcast and like unearthing more, I'm now down in the deep barrels of Vote, like realizing that like everybody hates Jews and I feel unwelcome there and I don't really know what to do. And like
Vote has gone full anti-Semitic.
Yeah, like, Vote is full.
Yeah, and that's a Q research.
I feel bad. I feel bad because I want to be in there lurking about like Q theories. Like I'm so fascinated by the game theory behind it and like the genius that they sort of like attribute to Trump. Like in some weird fucked up way, like I so want it to be true just because it's like the ultimate like reality mind fuck. But then I'm like, oh man, but like all these guys hate me.
You know,
because of
they want
my
what happened to your ancestors to have been finished.
Yeah.
So I mean,
It really fucking harshes my mellow.
Yeah, because they're all like, well, the way they talk on Vote is like, oh yeah, you know, you just got here, cool. We'll give you like this and this, and then later we'll red pill you properly.
Yeah,
like it is like there is a sense of inoculation.
Yeah, I read this one post where this guy was like, because you do have people in there being like, wait a minute, guys, like I don't hate Jewish people. Like I thought we were all here together, and the guys under it will reply. I saw this one guy replied. He was like, Q knew exactly what he was doing. Like when he sent you here, like he knows what we talk about on here. Like they're not, you know, they're not idiots. Like they know what we discuss here, and there's a reason that they sent you. Like we'll get into it later.
There's a way that people create cognitive dissonance where it's like, oh no, I don't hate the Jews. What I hate is these
evil
people,
Jews,
blah blah blah, that are, you know, masquerading or whatever as Jews.
The rise of Q and like other types of things reflects the growing need for robust mental health care in America.
Yeah,
and like a destigmatized mental health care too, because it's just like a lot of these people are malleable. Maybe, like, I mean, it's just like, actually it's like multifaceted. I think an educational component would probably could keep them away from it. And also just like a feeling of like being like alone or despondent or disconnected, disassociative, whatever. This gives them something bigger. And I think so many of us, like whether if we're in DSA, if we're
we need
any
it.
sort of like protest or organization or it's not any organized effort, just like it makes you feel good. That collective effervescence makes you feel connected. It makes you feel like you have worth. And I think for these people, they're maybe online all the time. Maybe they're out of work. They're poorly educated, they're downtrodden, whatever, and they end up here. And, and in this case, it's destructive.
And I would even add to that there's another more sinister component, which is essentially, you know, they've been told by the media and everybody else that, hey, there are two narratives of what's going on right now. And I think that a lot of these people, for the reasons that you just were talking about, Jordan, they go, you know what? I don't fucking care what the truth is. I really don't. I'm going to follow the story that I think is more interesting or that somehow validates my view of the world. And cuz the thing is like you can't look at a lot of this stuff. Some of it makes sense, but you can't look at a lot of this stuff and go, "You know what? Pinnacle of truth, absolutely 100% this is what the case is."
No, because you can talk about education, but I think American education has been compromised for a long time, and the kind of story about the American dream and capitalism and liberalism as a kind of foundational structure has been bullshit for a while. And so it's like over generations now, the level of disillusionment with, you know, having maybe believed for a certain period of time that there was change coming, you know, because people were running on change, you know, Obama ran on change. And so everybody wanted the best for that. Of course, you know, there's always going to be the partisan side of the country that doesn't care what he does or doesn't do. But I think anybody who voted for Obama, if they had to make like a bucket list of what they wanted him to do, like most of the things are not accomplished. Mm-hmm. And it's that promise of liberalism failing at the same time as the schools getting gutted, at the same time as mental health never being addressed and not even being treated as a disease. Even if it were treated as a disease, the fucking system's so fucked up anyways. But, you know...
Right. It's the perfect intersect. It's all of these issues coming together. It's the media telling them that the other side is their enemy, and not just their enemy. These people are evil. You have Jeanine Pirro this week saying they're demons, literally
demon rats.
Demon rats. They're literally demonizing their opponents now.
Yeah.
So at that point, when they're so dehumanized to the point where they're not even human, what does it mean? Like it's an afterthought that they would be
hung,
thrown in jail, or killed, or
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is where we're at. This system is so broken, and it's the culmination of maybe just the tip of the iceberg of a 20 to 30 year plan by these maniacal fucks on the right who have masterminded this entire thing through gerrymandering and campaign contributions and
voter
lobbying.
laws.
Yeah, voter suppression law, all of these things together now, weakening, tethering public school funding to property values after years of redlining.
Yeah.
All of this stuff is now culminated, and here we are. And this is just the tip of the iceberg because it's really drawing the most marginalized and the most like economically disadvantaged and least educated, and watch as it starts to grow.
Yeah.
This is horrifying to think about.
No, and it's the talking also about the way that law enforcement has just been encouraged to continue hiring and protecting the most violent elements among them. The feeling is that we're not going towards reform in that area. We had even under Obama the issue of militarized police getting worse. We had the kind of removal of a human element in foreign aggression with the drone bombing and stuff like that. It seems like we are at a point where horror and the infliction of pain or having pain inflicted on you is the way that we interact, whether it's with foreign countries, whether it's with each other. More and more it's humiliation and humiliated. And I'm wondering, can we snap out of that, or is that just the story of the Western world? Is that the story of the Western Europe and colonialism, and then its first proper mutant child, America? Are we seeing the end of a system that only ever really worked when we had the world under our thumb?
A lot of people who are staunch supporters of Trump, I think their solution to that is going back to some like weird version of like the 50s, or like,
of course,
it's kind of this like, oh no, like it's just gotten so out of control because of all of the progressive, like because of this progressive movement. If we can just get back to like 1954, and where we don't talk about marginalized groups. We don't really talk about racism. It's kind of just understood that certain stereotypes, that's how shit is. I do think that they probably believe that you could just kind of like turn back the clock and reset like some of these things, and everything else will sort of like fall into place underneath it.
Yes, because if your life fucking sucks and it hasn't changed in decades because the wage is not growing in this country, even though the profit margins are, and capitalism itself is growing and the stock market is growing, but it's not being shared by all people. So to those people, it's like, well, the only thing I had going for me was like there was this other race of people that I got to boss around. My wife cooked for me. Rape was fine. It's just like all this shit where those are almost... those are the privileges. Those are the privileges that you would have even if you were a fucking working class white dude that was, really being shat on by capitalism.
Right.
And now it's just worse than it was before. And they no longer are allowed to do all these things that sucked horribly. But the social project changes, but the financial project doesn't fucking budge. So no one's like experiencing a better living. They just are feeling like I'm getting my privileges taken away.
Yeah, the financial run over isn't going into any of the social shit. That's the thing, and the social programs are broken as is because they were probably built with trying to keep in mind like, yeah, we'll do enough, but like we still got the money, right?
That's the thing. It's like that Q thing of trust the plan, but it's like trust the plan just for a few more years until we can fucking kill you and turn you into ground beef.
I will gladly be the first person murdered in Q's name.
These are the same people, though, that same trust the plan. It's the same type of reasoning and justification for continuing to vote Republican after decades of failed trickle-down economics.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, just give it time. It'll work.
Just a bit more time. And it's always this idea that there was too much interference. Like it's the same thing with Trump. Like Trump's in fucking office now. It's been a year and a half. If he was going to make any big like sweeping changes for the working class, he could have done it already.
Right.
But you have to trust the plan. Don't worry. Like he's got you. Like just it's
obstructionist Democrats from economic now to social and civil.
The deep state is holding him in place. This idea that this man would be your champion if he was just let loose. And I had the same fucking system to cope with Obama not doing the shit I wanted him to do. By year 4, I was like, well, once he's got the brakes off, in his second term, when he won't have to run for anything. And it just never came. So Jordan, we didn't invite you on here for nothing. Who do you think Q is?
Barron. He talks about like he veers from updates to being mad about Xbox Live being out.
Yeah.
If I understand this correct, I'm certainly not an
this is
expert on
correct.
this. But he does that, right?
Yes, he talks about Xbox a lot.
Well, okay, if I can
gotta be
if
fair.
I could clarify, the Xbox post was actually
Wait, this is a real thing? I thought we were just making fun
No,
of you.
this is a real thing. The Xbox apparently, according to Q, Xbox Live was used to plan, the deep state's more nefarious activities because it was protected. The chat inside your Xbox headset or your PlayStation 4 is actually not being picked up by NSA monitoring. So Q had posted something revealing that, and then the next day Xbox Live went down, and Q posted, basically see, are they trying to hide something?
It turns out the deep state's entire plan was just B12 and say the N-word over and over.
Yeah.
And success.
Okay, but so anyways, yeah, sorry. See, so you see my predicament, dude. I kind of find the spy shit about it interesting, but agree with none of the political shit behind it. It's really it's fucked. It's a sad place.
I'm with you there.
Yeah, it's a sad place, and man, you should hear the fights I have with my girlfriend about it. It's unreal because I have to be like, I'm interested in this, but I'm not a horrible person. I have to. It's so, and I think a lot of couples probably go through that to some extent.
You guys, I just imagined the amount of terrorist cells that started being like, let's fucking do this shit. We're going to commit a huge fucking bombing or something. And then 2 weeks later, they're just playing fucking Fortnite. They're maybe even half of them are pro.
That's tight. That'd be a great movie, actually.
What were we supposed to do again? I can't. I mean, Three Lions.
They're like, one more loot box.
I don't know if you've seen Three Lions, a British farce about really bad terrorists.
Yes, I've heard of it.
Good. I think it's called Three Lions, something like that. What's next for you, Jordan? What is there anything you'd like to plug?
I mean, this podcast is good. I'm a big fan of Jared Holt's podcast as well, Shitpost.
Yes.
Yep.
If you're into this type of stuff, Jared's would be more your speed. Mine is more politics and commentary from kind of a Rust Belt perspective. So not universally appealing, but just kind of what I think about a lot, especially in the aftermath of 2016 and a certain political party completely ignoring and failing miserably in a region where Dems stand to just dominate. So
yeah, and I think those people probably don't have a ton of people talking about what their plight is and what they're interested in. So I could see why that's a really interesting specification to sort of focus on. So
I think that our listeners are smart enough to handle that. I mean, I've had a lot of pea-brained people write in. Just kidding. You should write in if you want to. But no, I think they can definitely handle it. What's the name of the podcast again?
Rust Belt to Beltway.
And you can find that on iTunes and all the other platforms. Yep. Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us.
Dude, this has been a very interesting conversation. There have been a couple moments where I forgot that we were on a podcast, and I just felt like it was three buds, kind of just shooting the shit about all this stuff going on.
Those are the best kind of episodes, I think. It just
Agreed.
It flows naturally.
Agreed.
It's good. Thank you for having me on. Thank you.
Of course. And you can follow Jordan on Twitter at JordanUHL. That's Yule. We are supported entirely by our fans. Go to patreon.com/QAnon Anonymous and contribute $5 a month to get access to premium episodes. If you can't afford that, just tell all your friends about us and go rate us on iTunes, where we are currently waiting for the mustard gas to clear so our troops can safely advance. Our central social media platform is Jack Dorsey's Twitter. You can follow us at QAnon Anonymous. And until next time, this is Julian and Jake signing off from the home of the deep dish.
It's not a conspiracy, it's fact.